Welcome. We're going to talk about just some tips of playing and working with your bass player or with a bass player, and maybe some exercises for drummers to work on to help develop their time and feel, so to prepare them and getting them ready to play with bass players. I've got some sequence tracks here that I'll play to in a minute, but let's just talk about the whole relationship between the drummer and the bass player. Mike Stern, I remember going to a Mike Stern workshop, and Mike Stern's a great American jazz guitar player. If you don't know who he is, please go and check him out, you know. But he did a workshop, and I remember these words that he said, and he basically just said, you know, the drums and bass are the heart and lungs of any band, and he's right. It's spot on. It is, and I'm not. You know, it's a thing where sometimes groups take the rhythm section for granted, and just, you know, we're there really to support what everybody else does. But working up a relationship with a bass player is to figure out where you both feel the time, and making sure you lock in together. I'm sure you've heard expressions like that, you know, how well can you lock in, you know, with each other. So it's really important to if you're in a band situation, that the bass player and the drummer get together outside of the band rehearsals and just really play through the tunes you're playing with the rest of the guys. And so it's just so you can nut out where you're both feeling the time, etc. And if you're working with click tracks where the bass player is not getting the click, but you are, it's pretty important that you really lock into that click, so that way he can lock, or she can lock into you. And that for me, that really just means outside of the rehearsal room with your band, getting together with your bass player and just playing your repertoire and working on your songs in that manner. As far as when you are playing with a bass player, again, it's important that you hear him. I don't like bass players that are so far away from me and their amps are on the other side of the stage, where there's a distance between myself and them. I prefer that the bass player be sort of next to me, and I'm sure bass players kind of like to stand or be on the sort of this side of the hi-hat, you know, having the hi-hats on the right-hand side of them. So I have the bass player on the left-hand side of me, and their amp kind of close to me too. And I also like being able to hear the cabinet. So if it's facing away in that direction, I'm not really copying the front end of the speakers. So I kindly ask if they can just move it a little bit and just get a little bit of a side-on sort of sound perspective from their amps, from their cabinets. And usually, you know, none of them have any problems with that at all. The only problem is when the bass player is so far away, and it's when you've really got to rely on monitoring and making sure you have some bass guitar. Well, I do anyway, having some bass in your monitors or in-ears. And I think it works both ways too. It's really important that the bass player hears, you know, if it's a real distance thing again, that if he's on the other side of the stage, that he does hear your kick, snare, and hi-hats. It's a different story when the bass player is standing right over the top of your hats. He or she can hear those, not a problem. But it's just when you're playing on bigger stages, it's really imperative that the bass player you know, can hear you. And it sounds ironic from an instrument that can be so loud, but there have been instances where there's been a bit of a time lag, obviously because the bass player hasn't got drums or some drums in the wedge or in his wedge. And once that sort of gets sort of fixed, you'll be surprised how well things come together better. So so there's a few sort of things to think about as far as, you know, the way you hear a bass player too. And the other thing too is with playing with bass players, I don't like, as far as gear-wise, I don't like playing bass drums that are bigger than maybe a 22-inch kick drum. 22, it can be a really punchy thing. Anything above that, for me anyway, it kind of starts getting into the bass player's sort of sonic, spectrum of the bottom end, where it can get sort of muddy and woolly, with a bit like a 24-inch or a 26 for that matter. Although they're fun to play and it's an almighty big sound. If you're on a gig where it's got to be punchy and sort of there's got to be sort of some sort of bottom end definition. I pretty much stay with this kick drum down here is a 20 by 18, and it's pretty punchy, and doesn't get in the way of the real low bass frequencies, which hence gives us definition. So that's my sort of thought on that. And I think bass players kind of, I'm not sure if they really care about that, but I care about it. So I care about the way that my bass drum sounds in relation to their bass sound, and also depends on what music you're playing as well. So there you go on that matter.